Ed, Edd and Eddy is without a doubt in my top 5 favorite cartoons of all time. This is mostly due to the characters. They may feel a little gimmicky and cliche at times, but for the most part, they have such a strong identity, and they work really, really well with each other. The character interactions in this show are just absolutely endless with how they all work. And while I could talk about the show as a whole so much, like I absolutely love the show, I could rant about it for hours, I wanted to talk about one specific episode today. And the reason for that was because on a stream I recently did with my artist Dulce, which you can find linked in the description below, we were playing some Pictionary, and for one of my drawings I decided to draw Eddy. And I was extremely disappointed with the result because my drawing was trash. But I was really disappointed in the live chat because it seemed like not many people even knew who Eddy was. Yeah, it's Eddy. It's Eddy. I love this show.
They said it wrong. They said the wrong one.
What? No way.
It just said Ed.
You guys are so bad. You guys are fake fans. That's Eddy. Old man. Boomer Show. You're about to get banned right now. You do not come into this stream and disrespect Ed and Eddy. Get out now. Go in goatee, bro. Hop off my goats. And the fact that they went so far as to call it a boomer show, that just makes me feel old and depressed. I mean, this show did just have its 25th anniversary, so yeah, I guess it is quite old, but come on, hop off my goats. Rant aside, the episode that we are going to take a look at today is the latter half of Season 2, Episode 2, called 1 + 1 = Ed. The reason this episode is so famous in the Ed, Edd and Eddy community is that it is just so off the walls and bonkers and random, which you could argue is the point of the entire show. The entire show is like that sometimes, but this episode takes it to a whole nother level by just completely destroying the fourth wall and absolutely abusing cartoon logic to create some hilarious visual humor, as well as maybe the wonkiest storyline this show has ever told. So the premise of the episode is that the Ed trio are trying to find out how things work. And of course, each character has their own motivations for doing so. Eddy, being the little rat that he is, just wants to use the research to make money, whereas Double D's motivation is strictly for educational purposes, and Ed's, well, he's there. He's just always there. That's what he does. And the episode starts off pretty tame. They don't go really off the walls just yet. They're just inspecting different things, trying to learn about them, while silly character interactions and hijinks ensue. But it isn't until they meet up with Rolf, the son of a shepherd, who is probably one of my favorite characters in the show. Just such an oddball character. And he shares this strange story about a tree of heads, and it's really weird. It doesn't really make any sense, but none of Rolf's dialogue does, and that's why we love him. But it is after this conversation that the episode takes its turn into the weird, where Ed goes to pick up a tree, and instead, once he picks it up, it turns completely flat. Almost as if he bended reality itself. And that's only the beginning. What I like about this part of the episode is the quick pacing. It's just joke after joke after joke, and all the characters seem like they're going insane, right? It all happens so fast, and I can only wonder what the storyboarding process of this episode was, because it flows like butter, right? It flows perfectly all into itself, and yet it doesn't feel unnatural at all despite what's happening on screen. For example, the next scene takes place where Eddy falls off of the cardboard tree, and in his dazed state, he wanders on to the background. And he just starts messing with the background. These silhouettes of houses that you would just expect to, see in the background of a cartoon, you just don't really think too much about. He starts interacting with the background. And not only is the visual humor really, really funny here, but the character's commentary on what is happening here is also so hilarious, because each character reacts to it in their own separate ways. Eddy is the one who likes messing with things, Ed is the one causing chaos amongst all this, and Double D is just taking down notes, and you can just see the excitement grow on his face as he's learning more about how the world works, even though they're just messing up everything. So after that scene, we get like a bunch of quick visual gags all in a row. Ed runs and falls under the road and somehow lifts it up with his face. Eddy falls off of of the Silhouette house and then finds that whenever he reaches his hand up into the sky, his hand goes behind the sun because it's like, oh, look at that. We accidentally put his layer behind the sun. Oops, the animator messed up. Uh-oh. But instead, he's just like, oh, that's weird. Let me just take a bite of the sun. And then when he takes a bite of the sun, it becomes the moon. It's like he takes a bite out of the sun almost like it's a chip. And then when it's just a little portion left, it looks like the moon. Like, not only is that really creative for the episode, but they also use that visual gag to make it nighttime in the show. And then it's just, it's so funny because the next scene transitions where Jimmy, a character who is very timid and frightened, immediately is like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Who turned out the sun? And once the Eds stumble upon Jimmy, they start interacting with Jimmy as a character. And I just find these transitions to be so good in such a chaotic episode, right? An episode where Ed just went under a road and lifted it up without any problem. Eddie stands on a building, destroys it, and also eats the sun. And then they just start interacting with Jimmy. And this is just like when things just keep getting crazier, right? They take Jimmy's outline. And they're just like, is that Jimmy's outline? It's just like, yeah, okay, so we just recognize the fact that we have outlines now. We've completely breaking the fourth wall at this point. Like that, we're not even just saying like, oh, what is that supposed to be? No, they just straight up say, is that his outline? And they just start messing with it. And without an outline, Jimmy doesn't have any coloring, so he just turns into liquid. It's just like, what is this? The visual gags are so crazy. I can't believe, I just want to know what the writers in the writing room are thinking. But yeah, let's just take away his outline and let's just watch him melt into the sewers. That sounds awesome, right? And that's not even it. We're still not done. Thing is, we're just getting started. So Ed then decides to just cut a hole, just randomly, he just cuts a hole into nothing. He just saws the air and it just creates a circle, which they have some weird, funny portal effect that they do. And then for some reason, Sarah just appears out of the freaking portal. And then Eddie does whatever this is, like he starts running and then you see like the little cartoon spinny run, right? The classic little cartoon, little leg spinning run. He starts running, steps aside, and then puts Sarah where he was running, and then she goes off running. It's just like, what? These ideas are so good, and it's all in one episode, right? It's all in one episode. It's just gag after gag after gag, and they're all sticking, and they're all landing, and they're all transitioning well into each other with beautiful pacing. Like, the amount of times I've seen this episode, it's never gotten old. It has never gotten old. Every time I've seen this episode, I used to, on my iPod second generation, I used to watch this episode all the time. In fact, I had a friend, back when I was in Boy Scouts, I had a friend that hated Ed and Eddie, right? He hated the art style. He thought it was so disgusting. And I said, listen, keep an open mind. Watch this episode. Just give it a chance. And we watched it on my iPod second generation on a car trip to a campout. And, you know, he was like, okay, that was kind of funny. You know what? That was kind of funny. I'll have to give it up. And guess what? A year later, he watched all the episodes and was a massive Ed and Eddie fan. You know, it wasn't right away, but like after the episode, it must have convinced him, and he's now a massive Ed and Eddie fan, just like me. And it's just like, wow, that's awesome, dude. Like all it took was this episode to convince him to watch the freaking show. Anyways, that's besides the point. We're getting back on track now. This is when the episode reaches its peak of weirdness. Because the second Sarah runs off, they're just doing whatever, Double G just immediately transitions into saying, oh, yeah, by the way, yeah, there's just a cow above us. Yeah, there's just a cow above us. It's just... it's just okay, now we've reached complete levels of randomness where they've entered this weird dimension where things are just flying around. And while Double D is constantly jotting down notes and Ed is just being chaotic interacting with the environment, Eddie is just like, hey, are we rich yet? We just have to read your notes, right? We just have to read your notes and then we'll just be rich. We've learned how everything works now. And it's just gag after gag after gag in this freaking world. Sarah appears again out of a house and Eddie's like, yeah, you're kind of loud. Let me just get rid of that mouth, you know? Let me just rip that mouth off of you. And then the mouth just bites Eddie. Because of course, why wouldn't it, right? You just took somebody's mouth off. Why wouldn't it bite him? And then while they're in this realm of chaos, again, it's just gag after gag after gag. And I'm not going to go into every single one except specifically for this one. Now, if you don't know anything about Ed and Eddie, you've surely seen this scene before with the three-headed Rolf. The life has many doors, Ed boys. This is iconic. This is an iconic moment from the show. Maybe one of the most memed frames of the entire show. The three-headed Rolf. It gets me every time. Every time without fail. The funniest part to me is when they just go, like you just hear, because that's like something that Rolf does, right? He always goes, it's really funny.
Ed, please.
I got you. How's he put on a hat?
But hearing 3 of them do it at once, like overlapping, and then you can just hear like his man from the background. It is the funniest thing. It gets me every time, dude. Every time. It's so iconic. It is so iconic, and it's the perfect representation, the perfect symbol for what this episode is. The 3-headed Rolf. And the life has many doors, Ed boys, because that's it. Life has many doors, and that's what they're figuring out. Although after the 3-headed Rolf, that's basically the end of the journey into this episode. That was basically the peak of weirdness. It was just so absolutely random. The episode really just ends by them kind of just getting back to reality, right? Because they were all just like on some weird trip. I don't even know what to call it, dude. And for one last gag, Ed and Eddie get stuck in a hole by running away from Sarah. Well, Ed tries to pick up the hole. It turns out it's just like some massive sewer grate. So then he just starts running with that big thing. And he's like, oh, that's a big hole. Ha ha ha. And that's how the episode ends. Because Ed would just expect to pick up the hole, but now it's just like, oh, now he's back to reality. But, you know, because of his monstrous funny strength or whatever, he can just pick up the hole and just run with it. That is the episode. Obviously, I don't think I did it justice, because you really just have to watch the episode to understand how beautifully stupid it is. It's just so dumb, and I love it. That's kind of what this entire show is, right? It's just 3 idiots doing stupid stuff all the time, and it's amazing. And I personally think this is the best episode of the entire show. I know the Ed Ed community absolutely loves this episode because of how crazy it is. The episode is just peak comedy. It is just peak comedy. Like I can still watch it to this day after seeing it so many times, and I still love it. Have you ever had something where you can watch it and you can recite pretty much every single line that's coming, but not just that, but in the exact same tone as the characters will say it in? I can do that with this episode. I pretty much know every single line that is coming. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna quickly share with you some of my favorite gags from this episode. So here they are.
I keep thinking, how can my feet smell if they don't have a nose? When you close the fridge door, does the little light stay on?
Go home! Garages are for cars, Ed.
Why, thank you.
Do not burn the candle at both ends, as it leads to the life of a hairdresser. Wait till I tell Mom what you did to Jimmy! Don't spill me. Don't look now, but there's a cow hovering just overhead. I feel uncomfortable.
Cotton gravy!
Careful, Ed. You don't know where that's been.
Oh, it's right here, Double D.
Was that Naz?
You realize we're floating, don't you? Hello, Ed boys.
All we have to do is read your notes, and we'll be up to our necks in Jawbreakers.
I love chickens, Eddie!
It's good stuff, dude. It is really good stuff. I have to, my brain just wants so badly to know what they were thinking, not only in the writing room, but while they were storyboarding this. Like, it's peak. It's so peak. I think that will be it for me, though, everybody. If you haven't seen Ed, Ed and Eddie before and you want to watch just a funny show, something that's not like super plot heavy, you just want like something funny to watch, maybe even just have it on in the background, Ed and Eddie is the perfect show for you. I highly recommend you give it a try. And if you don't want to watch the show, you know, maybe at least take a look at this episode. Once again, it is season 2, episode 2B, called 1 + 1 = Ed. So if you want to take a look at the episode, definitely go watch it. I highly recommend it. It's so freaking funny. But that will be it for me, everybody. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.